You're watching Face to Face. I'm your host, Tim Vince. You may have seen on the wide angle that we've got a return guest, and I'm thrilled that, Ravi, you found time to travel back down from Birmingham for wherever you've been in the world to be with us. And thanks for coming, Ravi. Ravi, I loved, this is a kind of part 2 of Lessons in Leadership. And what I loved about the first part, which you can just give us a recap on, was this is what's needed. You know, after a kind of secular humanist experiment of not having God and not doing God in the managerial world, now you're offering something which is going right back to the source. Just tell us, give us a recap, and then we'll see if we can carry on.
Hey Tim, it's good to be back, and yeah, I really enjoyed that last session, and it's great to be going through this stuff again. And should we dive straight in? And so we started in the Beatitudes, Matthew 5, looking at some leadership characteristics which we can easily sort of translate that are relevant to the world and obviously relevant in the Christian world. And what people might think is, well, are these attributes really aimed at leaders? Like I said last time, leadership is just about good human behaviour. So good characteristics are relevant in life, therefore they're also relevant in leadership. So if we dive into what we talked about last time, Jesus has gone up the mountain, miracles have occurred, and now he's got a following. So I said last time, one of the first things about a leader, you only really become a leader if you've got followers. And at this time, not only has he got followers generically, he's now got some disciples who are specifically following him. So this sort of inner circle of people are coming, but also this wider circle of people are coming.
Can I interject? So it's the Lord Jesus, as it were. So there's a spiritual dimension to his selection.
Yes.
He's not just randomly selecting, is he?
No.
He's chosen the 12 who he's going to disciple, who will then go beyond and make disciples of all people.
Yes, Tim, that's a really important point, because he's selected the 12, but then he's made it available to everyone else. So those are going to walk closest to him. He's made a very deliberate choice. And not necessarily the choices that we would make, but the choices that his recruitment policy is obviously perfect, because like you said, he is the Lord Jesus Christ. And so he's recruited some people to work very closely with him, which are going to be the disciples. And then now he's made available the things he's teaching to them, other people are now getting involved. And so he goes up to the mountain, and he sits down. So that's one of the really important parts of leadership, that leaders sit down. They are in a seated position. They're not standing over people. They're not in an authoritarian position. They're sitting down, and then he opens his mouth. And like I said, he gives context to this next 3 chapters, the longest teaching that he's going to do.
That's true. That's true.
He's going to start with the word
blessed. Folks forget that, don't they? That it is a really long discourse, isn't it?
It is 3 chapters. This is the longest of the discourse. And Matthew's the one who really captures most of it intently. And so he starts with the word blessed. And so then he goes on to a pattern, which I just want to explain a little. So he starts the whole thing with what I would say is the context or the impact. So everything in the next sort of 9 Beatitudes is all about this context of being blessed. And then he's talking really about fulfilling a need. So everything is really based around, here's the human need. Here's a process for dealing with that need. But in that process, so this is one of the things that leaders do, they see something wrong and then they go into process or methodology to try and fix it. And what Jesus does here is very interesting. He deals with substance. So there's a big difference between addressing the substance issues and going into process.
Very good.
So we learn in management how to, here's a complex issue or a problem, now sit down and map out a strategy to deal with it. And now we're dealing with the problem usually. Whereas Jesus is looking one step deeper than that. He's dealing with the substance. So in every one of these Beatitudes, there's always a need, there is a methodology, but that there's a substance. And then there's an outcome. What's the result of being poor in spirit, etc.? And
is it fair to say that, you know, because when I think of leadership, and I'm talking to, I know you've been in the corporate world, I'm thinking corporately.
Yeah.
But in one sense, the Beatitudes is very individual and personal, isn't it?
Yes,
so
it is.
You're basically saying that that's really a core part of any corporation is the individual.
Exactly right, Tim.
And how they're cracking along.
Yeah, so most leaders would say that people work for people. People don't really go and work for companies. All the evidence is that people stay retained, are motivated, effective when they work with somebody that they can relate to. So, and one of the top leadership things is approachability. So Jesus is approachable here, and he's showing us the need to be approachable. That's why we start with poor in spirit. And so last time we talked about poor in spirit as an attribute, and then we talked through them. So blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Yeah. Blessed are those who mourn, who shall be comforted, and blessed are those who are meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And so today I want to start with...
We should do, blessed are those who are patient, Tim.
Yeah.
Because you won't be worried about getting through all of the Beatitudes in one programme.
We'll do. We'll try our best to see how many we can get through. So I want to start with, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. So if we're looking at the need here, this is a need that I see in leaders all the time, a sense of emptiness and a lack of fulfillment. So we do know that financial wealth or even hierarchical prosperity, the idea that you're top of the tree, doesn't necessarily bring fulfillment. It can still leave you feeling empty and lonely. So Jesus is looking at this, and so the first thing he's identifying, here's the need, that there's an emptiness. And now he's going to give us the substance here is that to fulfill this need, you need to understand that God is righteous. And so righteousness with God essentially is the right relationship with God. And so the insight here really is that if you want to be fulfilled, if you want to have real meaning and context in your life, you need to be in right relationship, first with God and then with the people around you. So I encourage leaders to create this frame which helps them. God first, and then the family, and then the ministry, and then maybe other work. Okay. And so if you don't get that structure right, if you start putting your ministry above God, or if you start putting the ministry above your family, it's really difficult to be fulfilled. Yeah. You can do that for periods of time, but in the end, it's actually detrimental to both the ministry and the family. So many church leaders that I've ministered to where that priority hasn't been right. So the fulfillment doesn't happen.
That's such a good point. I mean, it's not about me, this show, but I was speaking at a big conference in Zurich and to church leaders. And I said, your first priority is your family. They're the treasure. And, and it's one thing to reach out and grow customers on the other side of the world, let's say, congregants. But it's no good if the bucket's leaking and you're losing those who are nearest and closest to you, because it costs a lot more to recruit new followers, as it were, than it does to retain your existing, your own family.
Exactly. And the scripture is very clear about that from my perspective. So the right relationship, don't just think of the word righteousness as being right living. First of all, it's right relationship with God. And with one another. And what it's saying is quite interesting, hunger and thirst for that righteousness, for that right relationship. And so the process here, so the need is that we're empty and we need to be filled. The sort of substance is that righteousness only can come from God, that right relationship with him is based on the work that he has done, not the work that we do. And so there's so much about... I will interject a little bit in here because I think it's useful to understand this a little bit, that there are really three different ways in which people are trying to achieve this righteousness. One of them is to work harder, try harder to deal with sin and whatever, and over a period of time, grace will kick in and you'll find righteousness and you'll end up with a good life. The second one is really about cry harder, feel more sorrowful, but be more mournful, and then one day grace will kick in and you'll be so sorry enough that you'll find this righteousness. And I don't think any of those really work. Our righteousness is based on Christ. Not even faith. So it says, it's faith is the mechanism, but Jesus Christ is the answer to that righteousness. And so I think if you really want to be in right relationship with God, it's not going to come through more effort and more tears. It's understanding who he is and faith and grace in him. And we can focus on the faith and the grace and miss the substance.
Yeah.
And that's really important in the Beatitudes. It's God's righteousness that gets us this fulfillment that we're looking for.
So just, kicking into, I know you've done consultancy work and, you're with a secular organisation and you're presenting this case for good leadership, good management. How do they take it when you say, actually, you first got to recognise the righteousness of God? In other words, a higher source of righteousness. How do they respond?
Usually quite well, because I'm usually saying to them, this is about relationship with people, your customers, your staff, your shareholders, your board. They understand that bit really well. But it's also a relationship with the values that you have and with the vision that you have. So I have to explain, when I'm talking about the kingdom of God, I think I shared this last time, the kingdom requires a king. Yeah. And that king then sets out the values and the principles by which you're going to work. He sets out the vision and the strategy. So when I'm talking to leaders, I'm saying to them, hunger and thirst for the right vision. Yeah. Make sure you've got the right vision and be in the right relationship with the people and your customers, and you'll find that life is fulfilling. Yeah. That message is really easy to translate.
Hunger and thirst for integrity,
honesty,
probity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they all know, because all the evidence is there, that ethical behaviour creates more profitability out the other end and is more sustainable. So, it's not a message that's hard to communicate, because I can just pull out the facts, really.
Yeah, very good.
And so where you exercise integrity, you have more profit at the other end. So these aren't just like burdens for us. Righteousness is not a burden. No. Being in right relationship is not a burden, it's a joy.
And it's sort of awakening your innate, what God's created, our conscience.
Yes.
There is this knowledge of good and evil. It's actually inbuilt, so it must resonate.
It does.
It automatically must resonate.
Exactly. And so I think that's that one. And so then he goes on to say, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. And so the need here is for mercy, the forgiveness of the things that we know that we've done wrong and the mistakes that we made. And so most leaders will only have got to significant positions of leadership through a series of mistakes and failures. And so until you've gone through those, you also, and for most of us, those failures haunt us. And there's a desperate need. I mean, Jesus could be talking at a conference to leaders and all of them would be saying, yeah, I'll put my hand up. I have some issues about feeling that I'd let people down, that I wasn't, didn't try hard enough. I wasn't, as righteous as I should be. I didn't. They'll
drop the stones when he says, "Let he who's without sin."
They
suddenly, okay. Yeah.
So the need for mercy is great in leaders, because they're all full usually. If the higher you get, the more mistakes you probably have made. And then but the substance again is that God is merciful. That's the substance. The methodology is, if you want to have this mercy, show this mercy to other people. And so if you want to be like this if you want to have this sense of being forgiven, this sense of being okay with the things that you've done, and you can get on with your life and move on. And so many leaders say that phrase, I'd like to move on from my past. If you really want to move on from the past, the methodology for that is forgive those people who are also making mistakes.
Very good.
Look at those people around you.
Short account, don't let the sun go down on your anger.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So this methodology of dealing with your past, by looking at the way you're dealing with people in the present. Yeah. And if you can get that sort of methodology right, the impact of that is huge. Like even Shakespeare says, the quality of mercy is twice blessed. It blesses him that gives and him that receives. So there's a real quality.
Yeah, he was very profound, Shakespeare, even though it was Portia and being quite cynical about Shylock. Yeah. But it is interesting that there is an objective value of being merciful, as it were.
Exactly
right. That can only make sense in the context of God
of God.
Of a reference point of mercy.
And that's why I'm saying the methodology is straightforward. The substance is God is merciful. So ultimately, that's what every human being needs to know, that is God going to judge them, or is he going to be merciful?
Yeah.
And so, and once we, settle and make, speaking to some leaders the other day in a particular organisation, and my word to them was make peace with God, because he is merciful.
Very good.
It's okay. He's merciful. You can have peace with God.
Wonderful.
So,
okay, let's go to...
Okay, so the next one he says, blessed are those who are poor in heart, for they shall see God. And so this again, what's the need that he's really picking out here? And this is this idea that we're aware of our sinful nature. We understand that there are things in our life which are not pure. It's so easy to compromise. It's so easy to get pragmatic. I was talking to someone the other day about, I came from a generation where it was clear that it's wrong to steal. And so if you're hungry and you're poor and you have no money, and you went into Sainsbury's and you picked up some tin of beans for your children and you walked out, it was wrong because stealing was wrong. Today we're living in a society where people would have a, is that really wrong? Is there something okay about that? Should we allow that person to get off?
I mean, you can be merciful after the fact, as it were, but you can't endorse, the erring.
Exactly. And so this purity is really dealing, for most leaders, it's not the obvious things, it's the subtle things. So he's looking at the heart of people and saying, what your need is that you need to know that you're pure in heart. And most people know that they're not, because they will have compromised at some point.
So this feeds into the main thesis of the Lord, I think, across Matthew, is that you're not going to make it unless you take my yoke upon you. He gets to I think chapter 11 before he says that.
Exactly. So the three chapters are all about this. Purity with God, acceptance with God is not going to be down to a human effort. And so the need is this sense, a desire for purity, wanting to do the right thing, not compromising, not feeling that you have to, sort of step back from values, etc. But that's really hard. So the methodology adopts here is, so blessed are those who are pure in heart, for they shall see God. So the issue is acknowledging there's something wrong. Coming to the realization that there isn't purity. And so once we come to that point, then we can look at God. So the substance is still God, because only God is pure, only God can bring that purity. And so desperate need in leaders to have this sense that they can be pure and they can be seen to be pure. So, for example, if you're a corporate leader in a bank or in a financial institution, most people out there will be perceiving you as being in the category of evil and bad. Because you are now greedy. You're one of the fat cats, you're one of the... And they, in one sense, will feel there's no chance of being perceived as being pure in heart. Who's going to think heads of corporations are pure? They are all the ones who are creating the corruption. And there's this narrative that's growing that, I do remember that there was a time when if you were the leader of an organisation, there was some credibility in that. You were seen as, oh my goodness, you made it to this place. Now we're in a space where actually if you're a leader of any big organisation, the starting point is probably something's wrong with you.
And there's a suspicion. What have you been up to?
So leaders are aware of this. So they then either get very reactive or defensive about it.
Should leadership be rebranded?
It should be like...
Because, when you read this passage, you don't... you've come out with something which I think is brilliant, which is that it's to do with leadership. But most people read this and they think of the down and outs. They think of the rejects of society. But actually this message applies to everyone.
It applies to everyone.
And someone who is... down on their luck, this can revive them. They can become leaders through adopting these
That's exactly right. So even theologically, he's teaching the disciples who are now going to go and transform the world. So he's a leader imparting to his team leadership attributes. He's saying to them, these are the characteristics that you're going to have to demonstrate if you're going to turn the whole world the right way up.
Wow.
And so it's these type of passages which I'm sure they went back and remembered. So when they were in positions of having to compromise, they were thinking about purity of heart. When they were in the positions of righteousness and feeling they'd got it wrong, they were looking to think, no, it's his righteousness. When it was an opportunity to be proud and whatever, they were thinking, no, he taught us to be poor in spirit. So I'm sure that this had a big impact on their leadership style, because he's demonstrating something to them that he's both living and sharing with them.
It's fair to say as well that they're all interfold. I think you've basically said that. But
yeah.
if you are pure in heart, that will have a bearing on all these other attributes, because it literally will stimulate the others. It will, what's the word? There's a synergy of all of these attributes working together. That's
right, Tim, because chapter 6 and 7 is going to get pretty tough.
Yeah. That's true.
And so chapter 6 is blessed. So he's saying, so the context is, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it together. But there are these attributes that can really help. And none of those attributes should be burdensome, because Jesus' ministry is all about bringing life, lifting off burdens. So many people can read the attributes and think, oh my goodness me, he's putting some pressure on us. He's putting burdens on us. And that's because they're getting stuck in the methodology and not in the substance. It's God who is righteous. It's God who is pure. It's God who is merciful. And as we look to him, that's what then starts to affect us and change us. It's his work on the cross that's making the difference for us.
Yeah, really good.
And so
it's really good. Oh, is it escalating, or are we saying that basically each of these beatitudes have equal value, and the escalate is cumulative, as it were?
Yeah.
Rather than saying, oh, well, the final one is, do you know what I mean? It's going up into a scale of a crescendo of...
You could read it like that, but blessing. I don't. The way I read the Beatitudes is setting a foundation for what he's now going to teach them to do. So he's saying, if you want to go and do the works of the ministry and make the difference in the world, the place to start is the foundational characteristics that define you.
Now, Ravi, we've got 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Dare I ask whether we could cover the peacemakers and the persecuted, and being falsely accused? 5 minutes.
Yeah, we can do, but
see how you feel. But
okay, so I think the main message I want to communicate in all of those is, and people can read it for themselves, is that the most important thing is that there's a need that he's addressing. So when you're reading those next three characteristics of the Beatitudes, look at what's he saying about the need. Then start looking at what's the process he's giving you to be able to address that need. But the most important thing I can say when people are looking at these Beatitudes for themselves is to say, what's the substance? Not what do I need to do about it, but what's the underlying substance? And if I've got a couple of minutes, rather than go through these, because I think we've given people...
what I also, if we could just sit back and say, look, in society and in organisations, in our lifetime, there's been an absence of these types of insights, even though folks have naturally practiced, I would say, right, to be fair to them, there has been an ethos there, but never, they've had a form of godliness, but not acknowledged the power. But we have come into a sort of aggressively secular world where it's almost absolutely shunned on looking at these scriptures as a source. How do you counterbalance that? I think your introductions.
I think the recognition is really important, that every one of those Beatitudes is pretty much counter-narrative to everything that's going on in the world. And so...
It wasn't always the case.
No, it wasn't.
And even though it wasn't acknowledged, it was really honoured in practice, if not, openly honoured.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right, Tim. And it's in all forms of life, whether it's for you as a family head or in politics or government, or whether you're in business, it's really the same thing, that those character attributes were very much a part of your call. So whatever it is that you were doing, the character with which you did it was very important. Now we're in a position where the basic narrative is your character and the life that you live isn't really that important. How well can you do your job? So you can be a prime minister and have a life that's over here, but are you a good prime minister?
Yeah.
Are you a good teacher? It doesn't matter about the life that you live. Are you a good, a manager of a store? Yeah. It doesn't matter about the life that you live. And disconnecting character from performance is a deliberate psychological society's sort of under the equalities thing, saying people don't have to have a certain type of character to do anything. Their character's not important. And that separation has created so much pain and distress in our society. So when I'm working with leaders, I'm saying to them, I want to reconnect the importance of character to the work that you do.
Brilliant, brilliant. Because I think there is a rumbling acknowledgement that it hasn't worked out as well as the utopians thought it would. Take God out of the picture, let's create this brave new world, and it hasn't. So that leaves a real opening.
It does.
For reintroducing
exactly
this stuff.
And we have the substance because He's in us. That hope of glory. It's not like that we have to carry a burden to anybody. We're lifting burdens off people. And as soon as we know, leaders know, and people that we talk to, they know that we're going to be there to help them. We're lifting the burdens off them. Of course they want to know because so many people are living under pressure and stress.
Tremendous.
And, so I think we have answers, Tim. I think the Bible provides those answers and it gives us a chance.
Can you also convince folk, because we're almost getting to a time where it's impossible to make money. Can you convince them, look, you can succeed without making money? We're in the last minute, but that's...
So the last thing I'll say is blessed.
Yes.
Blessed, blessed. 9 times. Get it, guys. The context here is this is the way the blessing happens. Financial blessing, peace, joy, meaningful life. All that word means. You have the benefit of all of these. What's the point of these Beatitudes? Blessed. Financial prosperity, emotional prosperity, psychological, this is the way that prosperity really happens. These characteristics bring you to that place.
I must say, Ravi, I tend to say we must do another one because, I feel blessed just listening to this, and it's got the Lord's words resonating still in the 21st century. So thank you so much. All I can say is be blessed.
Thank you very much.
And you be blessed, and we'll see you next time. We go face to face.